You've probably never heard of Parsun, but chances are, if you've walked through a marina, checked Alibaba, or looked for a cheap outboard on Amazon, you've already seen their engines. Parsun Power Machine isn't just another low-cost brand. It's a government-backed, tech-hungry marine giant, one that's now gunning straight for Honda, Yamaha, and Mercury. But here's the twist. It started as a private company in a country with almost no boating culture, and today it's China's largest outboard engine exporter. This is the story of how Parsun quietly rose from nothing, and why it might be Honda's biggest rival in the years ahead. Parsun Power Machine was founded in 2001 in Suzhou, China, about 100 kilometers west of Shanghai. From day one, the company wasn't interested in serving domestic boaters. China's recreational marine market at the time was almost non-existent. Instead, Parsun was built to export. Their early engines weren't revolutionary. They were reverse-engineered from reliable Japanese platforms, particularly older Yamaha two-strokes from the 1980s and early 1990s. These designs were proven, simple, and adaptable. Parsun didn't need to innovate. They needed to replicate and scale. To do that, they leveraged strong backing from Times Marine, a government-linked industrial group with ties to logistics and global shipping. This gave Parsun the tools most startups lacked: mass manufacturing, state-supported trade access, and an open pipeline to growing marine markets abroad. By 2005, Parsun was exporting to over 20 countries. Their engines were basic, affordable, and often shipped under other brand names. In Africa, Latin America, and parts of Eastern Europe, Parsun's reach grew quickly, especially in areas underserved by traditional brands like Yamaha, Mercury, and Honda. The turning point came in 2007, when Parsun entered a technical support partnership with Sierra International, a major US-based distributor of marine parts. This gave Parsun access to service infrastructure and dealer connections in North America and Australia. It also boosted their credibility overnight. Parsun began certifying its engines to meet EPA, CE, and CARB emission standards, giving them legitimacy in Europe and the US, where most Chinese-made engines couldn't legally be sold. By the early 2010s, Parsun had outgrown its clone brand reputation. It had become China's largest exporter of outboard engines and one of the most quietly competitive names in the global marine space. By the way, ever seen a no-name outboard on a John boat or Amazon listing and wondered who made it? Hit like if you've ever spotted something suspiciously Yamaha-shaped at half the price. You may have just met Parsun. Parsun didn't try to out-innovate Yamaha or Honda. They outpriced them. Their early strategy was clear. Take proven engine designs, simplify them, and make them affordable for markets that didn't need bells and whistles, just something that ran. The flagship models in their early years included the T15, T25, and T40 series, all two-stroke outboards loosely based on older Yamaha block designs. The Parsun T15, in particular, mirrored the Yamaha 15FMHS so closely that parts could often be swapped between the two. This made maintenance easy and spare parts accessible, especially in rural areas where branded service centers were non-existent. Parsun also cut out unnecessary complexity. Engines featured manual starts, basic fuel systems, and low electronics dependency. No EFI, no digital diagnostics, no costly dealer-only servicing. And that was exactly what their target buyers needed. But low cost didn't mean disposable. Despite early skepticism, many Parsun outboards held up well, especially when properly maintained. In fishing villages across Southeast Asia and Central Africa, fleets of T15 and T25 became daily workhorses. DIY mechanics loved them, Operators trusted them, and they were often half the cost of a comparable Honda or Yamaha. Still, quality control had its growing pains. Before 2010, some models suffered from leaky gaskets, weak recoil starters, and corrosion issues, especially in salt water. Paint finishes on cowlings and gear cases were also thinner than their Japanese counterparts. Yet Parsun responded quickly. By 2012, they improved casting quality, upgraded seal materials, and began using better marine-grade coatings on their top-selling models. The formula worked. Parsun wasn't yet competing on innovation, but on sheer volume, they were climbing fast. And while imitation built the foundation, what came next showed the world that Parsun was no longer content copying the big names. They were ready to challenge them. By the early 2000s and 10s, Parsun had already made a name for itself in the low-cost engine segment. But inside the company, leadership understood something critical. To survive long-term and to compete with Yamaha, Mercury, and especially Honda, they needed to do more than reverse engineer proven platforms. They had to innovate. That shift began with infrastructure. In 2013, Parsun opened a state-of-the-art research and development complex in Suzhou Industrial Park, spanning over 90,000 square meters. It wasn't just a test bench. It was a full innovation hub, complete with emissions labs, endurance testing pools, CADI design offices, and a dedicated fuel injection research wing. The result? By 2017, Parsun introduced its first internally developed EFI electronic fuel injection 4-stroke models, including the F20 and F25. These engines were no longer Yamaha clones. They featured new ECU mapping, revised combustion geometry, updated intake systems, and significantly lower noise levels. Emissions performance improved. So did durability. Parsun also ventured into electric propulsion, releasing a line of brushless DC trolling motors, portable electric outboards, and high-efficiency water pumps. These products targeted eco-conscious European markets, earning CE and RoHS compliance, something few Chinese marine manufacturers had achieved. But perhaps the smartest play was regulatory alignment. Parsun aggressively pursued EPA, CE, and California CARB certifications, ensuring that its engines could be legally imported into the US, Canada, Europe, and Australia. This immediately set Parsun apart from the sea of generic Chinese brands that flooded online marketplaces but failed emissions and safety compliance. By 2020, Parsun had grown into a multi-product, multi-region engine manufacturer with sales in over 100 countries. Their products appeared at boat shows, in dealer catalogs, and increasingly, on the water. They weren't just building cheap engines anymore, they were building credibility. And that new credibility? It started showing up in Honda's backyard. One fleet deal, one fishing village, one boat ramp at a time. But before that, we need to take a look at why Parsun's rise isn't just about engines. Parsun's success isn't just a business story, it's a glimpse into a much bigger shift in global manufacturing. China has long dominated consumer electronics, appliances, and electric vehicles. But marine engines? That space was one of the last strongholds of Western and Japanese manufacturing dominance, until Parsun broke in. Behind Parsun is a broader state-backed push to become self-reliant in key transportation and industrial technologies. Parsun isn't just a private company. It's supported by Times Marine, a government-aligned group that also supplies motors for disaster response, fisheries, and border patrol craft across Asia and Africa. This matters because boats aren't just toys. They're infrastructure. They power coast guards, ferries, flood relief, food supply chains, and, in many regions, essential transport. Parsun's export strategy isn't random. It mirrors China's Belt and Road Initiative. Their motors often arrive alongside infrastructure deals, port construction, or rural electrification projects. To developing countries, they aren't just selling an outboard, they're offering a solution. This isn't something Yamaha or Honda ever needed to do. Their reputation carried them. Parsun, on the other hand, is building trust in real time, through volume, pricing, and presence on the ground. And it's working. Parsun is becoming a strategic brand used by governments, NGOs, and entire regions that once relied on second-hand imports or outdated tech. It's not just a rival to Honda, it's a signal that China wants a piece of every engine-powered industry left standing. And boating is next. For decades, Honda Marine set the standard in the portable outboard segment. Their BF 2.3, BF 5, and BF 24-stroke engines became synonymous with quiet operation, extreme fuel efficiency, and rock-solid reliability. In many parts of the world, especially where emissions mattered, Honda was considered untouchable. But while Honda perfected refinement, Parsun undercut them with ruthless efficiency. Parsun's pricing was sometimes less than half that of an equivalent Honda unit. And while Honda emphasized dealership networks and innovation, Parsun focused on volume distribution, fleet deals, and government supply chains. In regions like Africa, Southeast Asia, South America, and parts of the Middle East, Parsun began edging Honda out of institutional contracts, providing motors to water taxi operators, fisheries, disaster relief vessels, and agricultural fleets. By 2020, Parsun was outselling Honda in several developing markets, not through superior engineering, but through scale and strategy. They built supply partnerships with local governments, offered bulk pricing on motors, and even developed custom long-tail drive systems for shallow inland waterways, something Honda rarely adapted for. Another factor? Parts access. While Honda service often relied on authorized dealerships, Parsun took a more open approach. Many of their engines could be serviced with standard tools, and key replacement parts were compatible with older Yamaha stock, giving buyers flexibility in rural areas where service centers were rare or non-existent. Honda responded by increasing global warranty coverage and releasing updates to its BF series. But in entry-level categories, especially 2.5 horsepower to 20 horsepower, Parsun became a real threat. And just as Honda was adjusting to that challenge, Parsun began making noise in electric propulsion, a space Honda had only dabbled in. In under 2 decades, a brand Honda likely never took seriously had become a competitor they could no longer ignore. But the story doesn't stop there, because Parsun isn't done climbing, and its next moves could reshape marine power as we know it. Parsun's biggest strength isn't performance, it's positioning. They found the gap between premium Japanese engineering and low-cost, unregulated imports, and they filled it with products that were good enough, cheap enough, and available when others weren't. In doing so, they've become a global disruptor in one of the most tradition-bound industries in power sports. Parsun engines are rarely revolutionary, but they're rugged, repairable, and available at a fraction of the cost of competitors. And in a world where thousands of fishing villages, river operators, and developing economies need dependable power more than cutting-edge features, that's enough to win loyalty. Their parts compatibility with Yamaha, their increasingly reliable EFI systems, and their expanding global dealer base give them momentum. And let's not forget, they've already achieved what most Western startups couldn't: regulatory compliance across EPA, CARB, CE, and more. But Parsun still has clear weaknesses. Saltwater durability has been a lingering issue. Earlier models were especially vulnerable to corrosion. Even today, while vastly improved, their anode placement, paint thickness, and casting finishes still lag behind Honda or Suzuki. Some owners also report inconsistency in quality control between units, particularly in electric start systems and remote throttle linkages. Then there's service. In markets like Nigeria or the Philippines, support is often excellent. But in others, such as inland US states or small EU nations, parts access and trained mechanics are still hit or miss. Still, Parsun is evolving. Their electric propulsion line is growing, and there are reports of hybrid marine systems under development. If they continue investing in R&D and refined support channels, they could do what no other Chinese brand has done in marine engines: go mainstream in the West. Because Parsun isn't just Honda's rival, it's a symbol of what happens when global demand meets manufacturing scale and plays the long game. And that long game, it's just getting started, because whether you trust them or not, Parsun is forcing every legacy brand to look over its shoulder. Parsun's story doesn't follow the usual script. It didn't start with a charismatic founder, a racing pedigree, or a flash of innovation. It started quietly, in a Chinese industrial park, with reverse-engineered engines, government backing, and a plan to undercut the world's most established brands. But 2 decades later, that plan is working. Parsun has become a global force, not because it reinvented marine power, but because it understood the market most companies ignored: the millions of boaters around the world who can't afford a $10,000 outboard or wait 6 weeks for service. In that vacuum, Parsun offered access, simplicity, and speed. And now? They're not just filling a gap. They're building real credibility: EFI systems, emissions compliance, electric motors, and growing dealer networks. They may never match Honda in refinement or Mercury in brand recognition, but they don't have to. They've already proven they can build functional, affordable engines at scale, and in today's economy, that matters more than ever. Parsun represents the next wave in marine propulsion: global, pragmatic, and increasingly competitive. For Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, and even Mercury, that means the entry-level battle is no longer just about who builds the best. It's about who builds what the world actually needs. Enjoyed this deep dive? Then hit that subscribe button, because we've got more coming. Forgotten diesel outboards, Mercury's biggest blunder, and a full breakdown of the electric engine arms race. And if you've owned, fixed, or fished behind a Parsun, drop a comment below. We're building stories from your experience, one engine at a time. Thanks for watching. See you on the next run.